Dear colleagues, let us start. Warm welcome to this seminar, which is called Societal Resilience and Local Governance in Ukraine Amid the Russian Full-Scale Invasion. I'm glad that you have come to OsloMet, and to all of you who are watching online. My name is Ådne Aasland. I'm the leader of UKRAINETT, the network for research, Norwegian network for research on Ukraine. Today we are going to have a seminar in a series of seminars that we arrange here at OsloMet and in other places about societal developments in the country. There is a lot of knowledge about Ukraine in Norwegian society these days because we get informed a lot in the news. But I think that one issue that is often overlooked is what is happening at the local level in the hromadas or the municipalities where people live their daily lives. And the Association of Local and Regional Authorities in Norway has started a collaboration program with Norwegian municipalities and between Norwegian municipalities and Ukrainian municipalities to support them in this war situation. And at Niber OsloMet, where I work, we have started a project to provide knowledge about Ukraine to these Norwegian people working in these municipalities on these projects. And we have worked on local government reform and decentralization, local democracy before, but we have not worked during the war. So in order to get a fuller picture, we need to invite scholars from abroad and from Ukraine who have done research. And one of the very largest experts on this topic, I think about half of the many publications that have been published on this topic, is our visiting scholar today, Oleksandra Keudel. Oleksandra is an associate professor and director of the Center for Democratic Resilience at the Kiev School of Economics, and she has published on Ukraine's democratic transformation and societal resilience with a focus on local governance. She's also a fellow at the Center for East European and International Studies in Berlin, also known as ZOIS, and also at the Center for Governance and Markets at the University of Pittsburgh. And she participates in this project that I just talked about, where we now have a startup workshop over 2 days. So we are very happy that you are here, Oleksandra, and we look forward to your presentation. There will be a presentation now, and then it will be an opportunity for all of us to participate in asking questions and discussing what Oleksandra is going to say. So thank you, Oleksandra.
Thank you very much, Ådne, for the introduction and, of course, for the invitation and for a possibility for me to come here and also work with you on helping with our knowledge production, build up stronger Norwegian-Ukrainian municipal partnerships. So I also want to on this stage to really thank the Norwegian people and the NORAD. We know how much Norway supports militarily and for the civilian purposes, and it's appreciated, and it is also a contribution into our joint security here in Europe. So thank you. Now I will move on to my presentation. Is there a clicker, or should I just use a keyboard? Okay. So what I will be presenting is a result of several studies, and here I want to present to highlight that it is a teamwork. So I work for Kiev School of Economics. We also have a think tank, Kiev School of Economics Institute. We collaborate with several teams, and probably the other half of publications, as you put it, is from my colleague Andriy Darkovich. There is also Tetiana Lukera, Miroslava Savisko, and a few other, Valentin Hatsko, and other colleagues who actually added a lot of knowledge to this. So you probably know from news that Russia has is now using cold weather to incite a humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine. This is a picture from Kiev, and just to give you a scale of overlapping crises that come because of the Russian war onto the municipalities, I put here numbers. So, for example, on the 24th of January, it was a third strong strike on Kiev in January, just in January this year. 6,000 multi-story buildings were out of heating, and there are 12,000 of these buildings in Kiev. So half of the buildings did not have heating. You could also see from the pictures that municipal and the companies that provide heat, they actually were quite fast to put it up again. So by 26, there were 1,330 houses without heating, but also 800 with no electricity. And you see this tent here is an example of what the city, also in cooperation with different partners, is offering for the residents to warm them up. So my goal today is to show really with brush strokes how the Ukrainian municipalities deal with the war-related crises that come because of the Russian escalation every day. What you have to understand is that war is, of course, not a crisis. War is war. What happens, though, Russia uses parallel techniques to cause many crises at the same time. So once you hit a house like this, there are people who have nowhere to stay. They have to be taken care of. There are people who died. There are no energy, no electricity, water in the cold in the pipes may burst. So then you won't have heating for a very long time. You have to fix it. And if it is a large scale shelling, then people start moving somewhere. So you cause a crisis of displacement. So that is a deliberate strategy because Russia is not going as fast as it would like on the front line. So deliberate strategies to cause these multiple crises one after another to crumble the civilian system. And that is what makes it very different from crisis management, how we know it, because usually crisis is like an abrupt event that comes usually. Maybe it's a technological catastrophe, but it's not something you really do deliberately. It's not like that here. So the role of Ukrainian municipalities should be viewed in the larger debates, actually, because there's a big polemics between consolidationists and polycentrists. Consolidationists basically say that once a crisis or any service provision is actually much better, much more speedy if you have a central authority that decides and spreads the tasks. But polycentrists, starting with Eleanor and Vincent Ostrom in 1950s in the United States, looking at service provision there, they actually argued no, because there are reasons that if you have many decision centers with limited and autonomous prerogatives and operating under overarching set of rules, that happens, you have a semi-autonomous units that deal with their contexts themselves and use their resources. And there is evidence that, for example, because municipalities are so close to people, they can more quickly and more accurately react to those problems that people have on the ground because of these large-scale crises. Then another argumentation is that because it's basically we're talking about a network, and each of this node can solve their own issues, and this is where innovation comes, because then after innovations, because usually these nodes are connected, and in Ukraine they are quite well connected, the innovation spreads, and then the better solutions win. And that is much better from the economic point of view than if there is some central uncontested authority that only says we will solve this problem this way. And another even more, perhaps bigger question, which is currently lots of European states ask themselves, is Should the societal resilience system be top-down, state-driven, or collaborative and horizontal? Again, the idea, I know quite a lot from the German perspective. The idea is that there's going to be the states will look after things, they will plan everything, that they will engage the something like German Red Cross to help out, but everything will be like sorted by the state. And Ukrainian system shows us that actually it's not always like that. And the Ukrainian system is more built on collaborative and horizontal collaborative work with non-state and state stakeholders, and horizontal ties between these nodes, which are municipalities, which are people. So you can think about this in different levels. That's why my main argument today is that the Ukrainian resilience model is polycentric, and municipalities play their vital role. They are backbone of this. So why polycentric? That is the administrative map of Ukraine. And after the so-called decentralization reforms, were actually 3 reforms: administrative amalgamation, and they created about 1,470 smaller units, but we used to have 12,000. So actually, there was the settlements. They were they were unable to cater for themselves, and they were merged into more capacitated communities. The Ukrainian speciality is that actually most of the mergers took place voluntarily. So municipalities basically talk to each other, mayors of these smaller units or civil society actors talk to each other, and they said, we want to amalgamate. The state provided monetary incentives for that. But in 21, this was finished administratively. Actually, yeah, 21, but it was done a bit earlier. This is a map of 21, but this was done earlier because in 2020 there were local elections and we needed the proper units. Now there was also a fiscal decentralization where municipalities got a predictable share of tax revenues so that they could plan their work. And there was political decentralization. The principle of subsidiarity really started to be more meaningful. And plus Ukraine in parallel was going through digital transformation. And once decentralization reforms, once people understood on the ground that these municipalities decide something and that they have money, accountability and transparency reforms were pushed by civil society. So actually we started to get local democracy, and there was a big shift to citizens being partners in co-producing their community, in making it work, rather than just some kind of apolitical service recipients. So I will be presenting results of several studies. So starting from the bottom, we had, in cooperation with the Council of Europe and the Association of Ukrainian Cities in 21 and 22, we had we had 2 surveys where we asked questions about how municipalities work with their community and how do they react to crises. Back then, it wasn't a full-scale war. In 21, I mean, in 22, it was a survey about their reaction, and then in 24 we collaborated. We received funding from the Swedish International Center for Local Democracy, so we could repeat some of the questions, and collaborated with the Association of Amalgamated Territorial Communities and several NGOs. And this is a map of distribution of our survey answers of 24. So our survey respondents are representatives of municipalities. It's usually 1 per municipality, and these are people in some higher rank, deputy mayor or head of department. So I will be presenting some of the results from 22, some from 24. So in 22, in August 2022, out of our 241 respondents, 2/3 preserved normal operations. So imagine a large-scale war happens, but 2/3 of municipalities preserve operations. I should say also that we had only 60-something% of respondents here who were from the rare So the rest were actually exposed directly to the war. About a third never stopped operating, and 43% returned in 2 weeks. They were already back to normal operations, like having council sittings and other proceedings. Now, in 24, and comparing to 22, we could also see that municipalities' preparedness became, they started to stronger understand what you need to prepare for. So there's a learning curve. That is, again, something that happens because they are responsible for their area. How we should read this? In 22, we asked how many of our respondents had emergency action algorithms, what you're supposed to do. So about half of them. So Ukrainian resilience does not come from detailed preparedness, what you're supposed to do. Ukrainian resilience comes because there has been this pre-existing conditions with decentralization, with citizen participation, and the societal and all our civilian revolutions, movements, and so on, where society developed capacity for self-organization. But in 24, we already see that more of our respondents said that they had crisis response plans, and even more practiced emergency response. You would ask yourself, like, what do those 10% practice if they don't have a crisis response plan? But the thing is that not always everything is formalized, and they just practice what needs to be done. And this graph shows a self-assessment of our respondents in how well they think they were prepared. It is our colleagues from KC Institute that asked that in October 22, retrospectively for February 22, and then we asked a similar question in 24. And we see here what might look like a drop. We actually, in high preparation, we interpreted it as understanding. Here they thought they were prepared because it looked like, we understand how war works. But after 2 years, we understand that there's always some kind of new disruption, some kind of a new terrible terroristic idea that Russia comes up with, and they have to deal with that. And how I understand this is they became a bit more cautious, feeling like you can be prepared for everything. And that's a learning for those for those municipalities who still are in peace. For example, here in Norway, you can't possibly prepare for every possible crisis. But that means you can work with how you think about dealing with them. So I will be focusing on 4 mechanisms for resilience that we partially take from the literature on polycentricity and partially inductively from our research. This is also, we're working with Oksana Hus from Karolinska University in Duisburg-Essen on a book where we will put this up more clearly. So the idea is that Ukrainian resilience comes from a lot of actor coordination, and it is because the crisis is so big that no state authority can solve it by themselves. But this it's nothing new from crisis management, like you need to coordinate. But what is important is you have to understand what are you coordinating for. And the purpose is that we see the lead, or at least connected to resilience, is when this coordination brings facilitation of local knowledge, so that people have everyday knowledge that you need in crisis as an authority, mobilization of resources, material, financial, new things of of solving crisis, experiments and innovation, and social cohesion. Now I will just present some of these evidence for this. So facilitation of local knowledge is very important, how Ukrainian municipalities kept people informed. Here you see a graph of answering the questions. We asked them, what was your most challenging war-related crisis? And then we asked, whom did you involve and in what way to solve it? And here you can see how informing the residents is very high among our respondents, how also entrepreneurs become very important between 21 and 22, and also how by 24 IDPs become a very important group with which municipalities communicate. So what are they communicating? It's very important to tell, where, what's going on, where is safety, where are invincibility points, and so on. They use social media, websites. They're also using, for example, digital maps of bomb shelters, but that's not an innovation for the war. Ukrainian municipalities used to use geoinformation systems, maps for showing where schools are. So it is just adaptation of the technology for the different context. Another aspect of how local knowledge is facilitated is with different stakeholders, it's possible to create new solutions for crises. So in high above is a graph which shows whom did they invite for consultations on an issue. And you could see how consultations went a bit down in 22. Well, it was very urgent, wasn't really much time for consultations, but it went, it's growing, went up to 24 in 24 again, because you need to, there are no elections. And how do you keep democratic connections and accountability? And that is the way to do it for municipalities in Ukraine. Also, a lot of consultations are done informally. So many leaders were identified in each municipality. Makarev in Kyiv region, through an interesting participatory process, they now have an informal network of leaders from different societal groups in a WhatsApp chat. So when that authority thinks, oh, I'm thinking about doing that, the deputy mayor basically asks in this chat, do you guys think it's a good idea or not? And he gets instant feedback from people who actually represent societal groups. So we also see here, that's very interesting, that is how accountability works when you can't deselect anyone. So this stakeholders argument influenced the decision. We asked who influenced your decisions. And for example, you can see how residents going up, IDPs, and entrepreneurs. So this feedback is becoming important. And that is also how decisions can be more grounded in realities of the stakeholders. So we also noticed a lot of sensitivity to feedback in social media. So Ukrainian municipalities look for ways how can they be still connected to their communities, and they monitor social media to an extent where they sometimes overreact, because social media, there can be 2 people who are unhappy, they make a lot of noise, 100 people who are quite happy, but they have no time or need to talk about it on the internet, and that sometimes creates even distorted picture. And we had to talk with some of the guys, don't worry, it's just 2 guys who have nothing to do. You have a much bigger audience, that is actually fine. And I know that many municipalities are trying to now, use surveys and other methods to better understand the big picture. We had interesting observation that in 2022, you see how experts become much less important also for the consultations. And that is what we call the democratization of knowledge. In a big crisis, knowledge that is everyday sometimes becomes much, and accessible, becomes much more important, because experts are, in the end, these are usually people paid by the development corporation in the context of Ukraine. They're not always available. It is changing now because there has been reorientation to different recovery strategies, so you need that, of course. But it was interesting to see how people's knowledge becomes important. This is just, I wanted to show you a picture of a consultation platform, Council on Internally Displaced People's Affairs. That's a very big movement in Ukraine. There are about more than 1,000 such councils at different levels. And this is how internally displaced people can channel their needs, give feedback to the authorities. Now I want to go to resource mobilization. It's a second mechanism for what you need to coordinate. So these graphs show answers on a question. I should have put the question here, but it was something like we asked, did you have any citizen participation initiatives in the past year? And if they answered yes, we asked, what was it for? And here you could see we have some data for 21. For example, here, to attract external resources. How important in 22 it became that through networks, municipalities were able to get additional resources for crisis management in their community. My favorite example, Novovolinsk, because I did their field work, so talked to business representatives, and they the mayor and these business representatives, they had informal consultations. And for example, one of the directors and all owners of a clinic, he arranged that he knew some guy somewhere in France who turned out to be, I think he's a member of French Parliament, but at the same time, he is also a doctor. And he was telling, made short courses for the Ukrainian military from Novovolinsk, how to put on tourniquet, because in 2022 there were many mistakes in how to put it, and people were really wounded. And the same clinic then mobilized their international clinic health resources to bring additional help materials to Ukraine. And for example, that Novovolinsk city in 22, they were actually working as a hub for lots of goods to come from the Western Europe to Eastern Ukraine. So that is, this attraction of external resources is a really important function. Why do you coordinate? But then we also see things like meeting the needs of vulnerable social groups, because the needs are much bigger that the municipality can afford to provide for. And here, that is an interesting observation that in 22 here, there was a lot of volunteer help. It looked, again, in Novovolinsk, it looked like on February 25, there were about 100 people standing in front of the municipality and saying, look, we are regional from Novovolinsk, but we escaped Kyiv, and we are actually all project managers, IT developers, logistics, whatever. We want to help. So in Germany, for example, they the authorities for dealing with catastrophes, they make a lot of thinking about how do you engage in structured way the spontaneous help. And it's not an easy task. So for example, some Ukrainian municipalities, they arranged these people into groups by directions. And from each group, a leader came out, and they made like a tree. So the mayor would only talk to the leaders of the group, and the group leaders would then spread tasks or do whatever they need in their groups. And this way they structured, again, informally, this kind of spontaneous help of volunteers. But this was not that needed anymore in 24 because the structures were already there, even if informal. So it's not like it's some kind of a state directed way of doing it. It is all bottom up. And for resource mobilization, what's important is that there was a co-production. Co-production means that you not only help with your ideas as a non-governmental actor, but you actually take part of the responsibility for implementation, or at least coordination of some solution. And you could see that that was pretty low in 21 because there was really no need. And in 22, how it went up, for example, for the entrepreneurs, it's the pink one, or for just residents, which we should read as volunteers. One of my favorite examples is the air defense west in Ukraine, because Lviv is a place with very strong IT cluster. And and then you realize that the air defense people, they have to learn how to kill the drones, and yeah, that was how to use NLAW, this big thing that, okay, I'm not a military expert, but you know what I mean. And basically the IT cluster in Lviv wrote a software to train the air defense people with 3D visual glasses, how to use the NLAW. And that is a program. This has been running now for all this time. So that is the co-production. It is not, and you shouldn't mix it up with a standard, for example, Swedish approach, of which I know is like where you buy the solutions in a structured way, you set up contracts and something like that. That was all made as the plane is burning. This is a picture from Novovolinsk. Serhiy Kornelyuk gave it to me because that is actually an example of this hub of coordination where he and other people just showed up and said, okay, we will help you deal with the war. When we were there in September, it wasn't already that necessary. So the place was empty, but that's how lively it was. And important that entrepreneurs, again, are really important partners. So we could, if you're interested in this topic, I really recommend the work by Inna Melnikovska, because she really looked at, her argument is that there's a corporate citizenship in Ukraine emerging, but it is not your greenwashing or CSR or whatever they call it, but it is more about, okay, if we don't contribute to their defense, well, who will? And it is like that companies seek for their place in the contribution to the defense. I also wanted to highlight experimentation and innovation, especially of occupied municipalities. I should say there has been a lot of different experiments and innovations in adaptation of existing practices or making new ones, but this is something special because as you think of it, a municipality, for each of you, you live in a municipality, all of you live, it's a place, it's a territory, right? Occupied municipalities don't have access to their territory anymore, but still they exist as their local self-governments exist, and then they also provide services to their residents. Here on the picture is a service center of I Mariupol. It is a chain of about 13, if I'm correct, centers in 13 cities of Ukraine where Mariupol residents escaped, and they can get help with primary needs or with maybe job search. And it's not the only Bakhmut, for example, they set up their job center, basically moved, I think, to Dnipro, and they help their Bakhmut people to find jobs. Also Melitopol, they created something very similar to in the idea. And here in the graph, we had 20 respondents from occupied municipalities in 24. And you see what they do to keep connected to their community. They run community pages on social media, website. But what is really innovative is they created a database of community contacts. So they systemically keep connection to the people that escaped. And for example, I Mariupol is also working as a bit of a human rights organization, because not all Ukrainian cities are equally good in incorporating IDPs, and whenever there are problems, they step in. And also the mayor of Mariupol, he travels around Ukraine and argues, help my people. And Mariupol is currently having an interesting project to build housing for their people. And I wanted to also show you about the other mechanism, which is social cohesion. So in the war, there's no justice in the war. But when you're in the war, there is even more different kinds of injustices on different levels. And, sometimes some people have lost everything, and they came to a city or a small town, and they are given food, maybe they have given a shelter. And then there is someone in that city who still have a place to sleep, but they are poor because they lost all their economic sources. And they think, and what especially was in 22 a problem, sometimes international organization would say, here we give aid to IDPs, but the poor people from the same town they didn't receive anything. And it is, of course, a ground for заздрість. Envy, yes, it is a ground for envy, and this is something that can ruin social cohesion. So some municipalities figured that out quickly, and they made deals even with international humanitarian assistance, is that we will also provide this aid in the same way to IDPs and to the poor people in the municipality. I think that was Zaporizhia. They said they were doing this like in Zaporizhia region, okay, IDPs get it twice a week and locals get it once a week, and then try to make a communication that you have a place to live, and they don't. But that's a lot of work that you really have to do in parallel to solving whatever crisis is, because when injustices mount up, it also makes society vulnerable. And we could see in our responses to our survey that, for example, strengthening community cohesion remains rather high as a goal for engagement. Inclusion of diverse opinions actually grew. So that is 24, that is 22. Again, municipalities, they are municipal self-government authorities. They're close to their communities. They know, they sense the fabric of society, and they signaled us, and with their actions, is that even though democratic accountability is not there in full, we still need to keep these democratic channels in the society, and that is why for them all kinds of participatory innovations, they still try them during the war, because they need to keep contact to their community to include diverse opinions. Trust is important, although we really don't know why this started to be less important, but it looks like sometimes you just get random answers, you have to deal with that. And what is interesting is that still lowering emotional fear and pressure was also important, but it was more important in 22. So like my explanation is why some of these answers went down is also because in 22 you had to it was this keeping, you have to keep it, the society, and and show to people that you are a trustworthy authorities. And it's not like that's not important anymore, but then maybe they prioritize more like service provision functions at this point. So what we can conclude from what we know to date about societal resilience and local governance, I think Ukraine and Ukrainian municipalities provide a lot of evidence is that decentralization is definitely not a problem for societal resilience. It may have its, there are always coordination issues, but we see that Ukrainian municipalities were and still are backbone, the institutional skeleton for the state to continue functioning and for people to live, because you see the Russia really wants that Ukraine turns into a refugee, and that there are groups that people go out, but people stay. And the fact that municipalities are functioning, that is a really big part of that. Another conclusion is that when you have a functional stakeholder engagement, that is what supports resilience. That is what we call Ukrainian model, because it is collaborative with non-governmental actors. It is horizontal connections. I should also mention here that horizontal connections between municipalities and through their associations, that is a really strong factor here, which helps all of this. So circulate knowledge, mobilize resources, experiment, and and this coordination is important for keeping social cohesion. But we also see that societal resilience has limits. It is not some kind of a trait that you have as a society, or that a system like this can be resilient for unlimited time. Because for resilience to function, you need room for maneuver, so you cannot be at the wall already. Societal capacity. So in our surveys, one of the big issues is that Ukrainian municipal employees are overwhelmed with war-related crisis and with the coordination and communication. It's a lot of work. And since they are understaffed, they were also in smaller municipalities, staffing was a problem even before 22, but with refugees and IDPs of about 10, 12 million people, you can understand it's a lot of pressure on human capacities. And time also, because over time, resilience, it fluctuates. The other thing is that Russia escalates. It is a very targeted, it is very strategic escalation of these pressures on the system. Because, and here's a third one, resilience is with phases. There's a phase of immediate reaction. Then there's some sort of stabilization when you adapt it. But then normally you should have a time for learning and for institutional consolidation, so that this learning and practices become ingrained operating activities. But since Russia constantly escalates, for example, that was a really targeted, that there was a Russia hit Kiev's energy 9th of January, I think 20th and 24th, and it was deliberate so that once you fix the system just a bit to get some kind of life normalcy, they hit again. And that is why many solutions remain fragile and it's difficult to sustain. So on this note, I want also to give a message maybe that, of course, Ukrainian resilience is polycentric. Municipalities are functioning, but they also need a lot of help. And the help starts not just from providing humanitarian aid, but it provides with air defense and defending the skies. It comes with taking away Russian resources to continue this war as a root cause, and only that then as a second tier the help can come with different institutional support activities and opportunities for development and so on. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
So thank you very much, Oleksandra. Very, very informative presentation. And I think it's especially interesting to see how municipalities seek to uphold democratic practices during very difficult times, and democratic practices that take time, but that it is worthwhile. We have almost 20 minutes for questions and answers, comments maybe. I would like to start by asking you about the military administrations that sometimes have taken over the functions of the elected councils at local level now. And we see that this is more common near the front line, and sometimes they exist in parallel with the local council. So how do you see any difference between those municipalities where there are military administrations in comparison with those that are run by the elected council? Yeah.
So my colleagues Andriy Darkovich and Ostap Hnida, they did quite a good study about operations of these military administrations. So there are, at least in 24, there were about 13% that had military administrations, and the reasons for that is, as you said, it's frontline because you need a military. The civilian life is nearly impossible, but also it's because mayors were killed or kidnapped. So that's the reasons. And what we see is, how to say, qualitatively, there seems to be less of these democratic practice opportunities because this is not but then one more caveat. So sometimes these local military administrations are introduced, but their mayor and it's the mayor. So if you don't have this actual change, then the practice is also continue. But if you have a change where it is different people, where you have a personnel that has never worked in local self-government, Then this is where participatory practices are less practiced, and this is where citizens and civil society actually complain that reconstruction efforts are not very targeted to the needs of the people. And there are interesting monitoring initiatives right now to try to overcome it, so to see whether whatever has been restored is actually fit according to the needs of the people.
Thank you. Now, please, when you ask a question or a comment, please also introduce yourselves.
Yeah, hello. My name is Elita Tsakula. I'm from Norwegian Association of Local and Regional Authorities. And my question is, thank you very much for a very interesting and useful presentation, first of all. And then the question. Have you also looked at the local media and the role of local media in both information, but also preventing disinformation, panic, and especially in the front regions, and also the role of the printed media? And then there is, of course, in the circumstances of war. So you also have kind of limitations what you can write about and what you cannot write about, not to expose the strategic information. So what role local media play in all this landscape?
So in short, we did not do a very detailed study of the local media. What we know, definitely mayors and our other respondents, they said it's very important to keep people informed about what's really going on and set up communication channels for it. And the local media are important here because it's the municipal leaders are trusted, but it's not 100% trust. That's why when there is this additional channels, that is always helping. Regarding printed media, unfortunately, I don't know how the situation is, but there is a growing network. They call the window of recovery or recovery window, Vikno відновлення. It is currently 160 small outlets, mostly online and probably even, I don't know, Telegram-based media that are really, really important because they deliver this up-to-date information. And that's why to counter, Russian, they're important to counter this disinformation, but at the same time, since they use the same Telegram and other channels, it is we don't really know to what extent and how this helps to really go over the disinformation. So I would say we need another study on that. And sorry, what your second question? I realized I forgot it. But you answered.
Just a brief comment, because we in a couple of weeks there will be a seminar here and a parallel project about the media and journalism in Ukraine. So follow our webpage and we will provide information about that. Yes, then Oleksandra.
Oleksandra Deneko, Oslo Met. Oleksandra, thank you so much for a fascinating presentation. And I actually have two questions. My first question touches upon a martial law regime that was introduced in February 2022, because we know that there are several significant restrictions when it comes to the, for example, cooperation with the local community and information exchange. And I wonder, because you have data collected before the full-scale invasion, so my question is, how do you consider a martial law regime can we view it as a hinder when it comes to the democracy at the local level, or your impression is that actually municipalities in Ukraine, they created some sort of ways to avoid its effects and to maintain their capacities and agency when it comes to local democracy? And my second question is actually about social cohesion, because we know that there are maybe hundreds of definitions when it comes to social cohesion. And we have vertical, horizontal dimensions. So I wonder, what is your focus in this study? So is it more about local processes and how people are cooperating with local authorities, or it's more about this intermunicipal cooperation? So if you could elaborate a bit on this, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And you reminded me Alita's first question. So regarding martial law and information. So the martial law established indeed, especially until about 24, even 23, middle of 24, strong restrictions, for example, on open data. Ukraine used to have very progressive registers that you can download lots of data from the governmental data portal. It was recognized by open government partnership. So it has been a really lot of work done on transparency and open data. And this has subsided, and it did not recover to the invasion levels, neither at the governmental level nor at the municipal level. Reasons for that are very different, and also it is different for municipalities with different capacities. So the Transparency International Ukraine had a study in 24 measuring transparency and open data of municipalities, and we could see that those that were already pretty good in making data information transparent, they were faster to return to almost pre-invasion levels. And those that had trouble doing it, who had low scores, anti-Ukraine scores, they also did not. And the reasons for that is not just the law itself, but also not something political will or something, but transparency of data requires a lot of infrastructure, and especially small municipalities, they just don't have it. Data centers, storage capacities, and it is a big discussion in the Ukrainian, especially there's an open government partnership initiative, and within it there is a platform for dialogue between local authorities and the government on how to make Ukrainian data open. And one of the problems which I know of since 21 is that municipalities always ask the state to provide a reliable cloud storage where they could provide this data and provide some kind of a digital software solutions. But so far, this has not been done. And there is now a new law, now from 25, I think, although I might mix up the dates, which actually requires, for example, restart broadcasting of the sittings of the council, or if they are in the front line, then it is you have to publish recordings in certain time after it. But again, many municipalities, they don't have a camera to put it like we have here to store it somewhere. So it is a challenge, and sometimes I think that neither governmental actors nor international donors, they don't think very detailed through the implementation, even though that is a needed thing. And I'm not saying we have to stop doing open data or something. So, but this is a big need. Regarding levels of transparency, Elita's question was related to yours, is how do you decide what do you communicate, especially if it is security related? Again, this is a huge challenge. On the one hand, the Ukrainian local self-government actually expect some guidelines from the regional military administrations, because they say, well, we are not responsible for security, actually. You should tell us how we should communicate. But there is some regions, I believe Kharkiv municipalities, are very happy with how this is organized, and some regions say that they have to make a little bit of informed judgment. So, but in general, Ukraine also made a very interesting curve here, a learning curve, because in 22, if you remember, 30 seconds after any Russian missile hit the target, there were social media posts about it, and currently people seem to be generally more educated about how you should be doing it. And regarding social cohesion, we definitely only, here I meant people within the municipality. But we do study intermunicipal cooperation, and there's lots of interesting examples. For example, how if one municipality was not occupied by Russia and and one next to it was occupied, there were, for example, smuggling of bread and medicine between the municipalities.
I have a question. Are there questions in the chat?
We have a question in the chat from Selvi Vikan from Norad. You mentioned that municipalities co-create solutions with entrepreneurs. Could you elaborate and provide some examples? Should we take another question? Maybe it's the last round.
Yes.
I have a short question. So my name is Natalia Moen Larsen. I work at Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. And you mentioned communication from municipalities through social media. And I was just wondering what kind of apps they use. You mentioned Telegram, but do they use Meta for their official communication?
Facebook.
Meta apps. Okay. Yeah. So Ukraine doesn't have any own social media app that they develop themselves. Okay. Thanks.
Regarding the co-creation of solutions, one of the vivid examples is the unbroken ecosystem in Lviv. This is a rehabilitation. Basically, it's a municipal hospital turned rehabilitation center for the people who were wounded in different kinds of like military type wounds and amputations, where they can now also receive health support, psychosocial support, and they now build a whole infrastructure so that family members could come and visit them, and or so that they could get ambulant, like that they could still already live kind of home at home, but they don't come from Lviv, so that they could stay somewhere. And this whole infrastructure is a cooperation between the Lviv City Council and local business, especially IT cluster. There is a governance structure which is like a board, and the members of this board represent these institutions. And that also means that these entrepreneurs, they use their connections also to mobilize funding for this. Another a small scale example, it was a social taxi in Nemishaev. No, sorry, not in Nemishaev. I forgot which. The idea was that since people were not elderly people, not mobile, that the taxi providers, they coordinated with the local authority, and if a senior person had to be driven somewhere, they would be just driving them for free. A small scale example. So then we have. I would say I could go into more details. What I think is good to know is that almost at every, if there's certain interesting international cooperation, for example, a lot of it comes also through the business connections. And once there is interesting platform, idea, some kind of bigger project, if you scratch it, there will be a business involved. For example, one of my favorites is in Odessa region. They it's an agricultural municipality, and they have so-called water users that are agricultural producers that need systems for water irrigation. And it used to be like a state system. It was not very well functioning. It was they had to pay high prices on that. So they together with their local authority, with their relevant state authority, and with these local users, they created a first in Ukraine, like a public-private partnership system, which kind of owns now these irrigation system. They modernize them, and then they pay normal prices, how I could understand it. And that is, again, it is this cooperation between the business and authorities. So maybe my final thing is here is you shouldn't think of it they are not only doing humanitarian or relief, but the cooperation is also about changing the rules of the game for more fair, for more transparency. So that is what Ukraine's transformation that has been going on even before 22, but it started to become more pronounced in 22, especially medium-sized business and small.
We have time for one more question, if there is one question from the chat. But very, very brief, because we are... Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Oleksandra. It's great to see you here again in a different city. I'm Phil. I work with the Ukraine program at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but also with SINTEF here. That's why I'm here in Oslo. So one of the things that we are trying to figure out is the communication infrastructure for the civil society, right? Because back in the days, where during the Occupy Wall Street movement, then that led to the emergence of these mass communication network, which became Twitter, right? And then with one of these student movement in Taiwan, they also use improvised communication networks so that the civil society and the grassroots coordination can happen in a secure fashion. And one of the things that bother us a lot about is the dependence on Telegram platform for everything, right? And that this relationship is almost very toxic in a way. And so what we're trying to do is to figure out how to leverage this digital citizen authentication platform that Ukraine has already set up, right, to be able to validate the authenticity of every citizen, digital passport or whatever we call it, into a new form of sort of communication platform where the civil society can govern and then control. And so if we want to instigate this kind of sort of project, like what would a good starting point be, right? Like where do we come in? What type of organization do we start from the extreme bottom up or the middle level? And like what would you recommend as a partnership sort of?
So I would say you always have to go two ways. You should find a civil society partner who really believes in your idea, and you should all go together to the Ministry for Digital Transformation if you really want to use it via DIA, because that's what you call passport. Because but you don't have to involve ministry necessarily, but you need a strong civil society partner.
Thank you so much, Oleksandra. You have given us a lot of food for thought. We will continue to work on these issues over the next 2 years. We have now, throughout these 2 days, we are continuing to discuss how we are going to go along with our project, and you will hear from us when we have done some research ourselves. We have got funding from the Directorate of Higher Education and Competence, so we are very grateful for that, and hope to see you in these and other seminars that will take place over the next at least 2 years, and then we will see what happens to UKRAINETT. So thank you for coming, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Odna.
And I have